Madam President, this is a war of choice. It did not have to happen. There was no imminent threat from Iran. The indications right up until the attacks were that negotiations were actually trending well. And remember that if Donald Trump hadn't pulled out of the JCPOA to begin with, Iran's nuclear program would have been continued to be managed. This is the President of the United States asserting that he can do whatever he wants, wherever he wants, with the most powerful military in history at his disposal. It is important to point out that a lot of people put Donald Trump in office because he promised to oppose forever wars. It was central to his foreign policy pitch as a candidate for over a decade. But what we've seen in the past 2 months alone is a president that is eager to use kinetic force as a first option and then figure it out from there. And the challenge with the Venezuela action was that our men and women in the military and intelligence agencies, they executed that thing so efficiently and effectively that I think Donald Trump got it into his head, this is great. What else you got? This is great. Are we doing this in Cuba? Are we doing this in Iran? What else you got? And so he gets on an airplane and he starts shooting the breeze with members of the Republican Congress, and he decides in that moment on Air Force One to start a war. To start a war. In the days after capturing Nicolas Maduro, the administration offered up confusing and contradictory claims. They said that the United States was going to run Venezuela indefinitely, but then left most of the illegitimate Maduro regime in place. They said that American companies would go in and rebuild the refineries, even though most of the American companies said they wanted nothing to do with it. And maybe most confusingly, they said that the United States would control oil sales, but not the revenue from those sales. 2 months later, we still don't know what their plan is, and that was easy compared to this. That was easy compared to this. There is no coherent strategy, much less an attempt to even explain it. I want everybody to understand how unique this is in American history, maybe world history, to have a leader say, I declare war, and I'll let you know why later. I'm going to send Secretary Hegseth out there to say some things that are kind of indecipherable. Then Secretary Rubio, certainly a better communicator, but also still indecipherable. And then the President of the United States has a press conference, presumably to explain himself, and he's personally so distracted by the ballroom renovation that it makes me sound like I'm some person who is so obsessed with Donald Trump that I watch MSNBC, I have an IV drip of MSNBC and TikTok to make me hate this president. But actually, that's what he did. He took a kinetic action against another country, and then when it was his time to explain why, he sort of talked a bit about it, but then he was really passionate about the curtains that he chose, about the color of the ballroom, about the jackhammers running from 6:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. That's his passion. And he is letting these neoconservatives run wild within his administration. And I want to make a very specific point about hopefully tomorrow's war powers resolution introduced by Senator Kaine and others to block the use of American forces in Iran. I will support that, of course, but make no mistake. If a war powers resolution is defeated, that does not constitute an authorization of the use of military force. The way this works, right, is that a president has some flexibility to basically take a kinetic action, to use the United States military to protect American interests if there is an imminent threat. What do we mean by imminent threat? It is what it sounds like. They're about to attack us. And Secretary Rubio, again, very good communicator, and I talk to him all the time, he said it about an hour and a half ago. He said it. The imminent threat, I want you to listen to this logic chain. The imminent threat to the United States was that Israel was going to attack Iran, and we anticipated that in retaliation, Iran was going to attack our interests, therefore imminent threat. That's not what we mean by imminent threat. There are no bank shots when we're describing an imminent threat. If we want to conduct a war of choice, and we have in the past, we need hearings, we need briefings, we need a proper debate, and then we need a vote on the authorization of the use of military force. That is foundational to the oath of office that we took when we became United States senators. This is actually not a particularly controversial point, except that we're in this very weird moment where I think the public was sort of not tracking at all that maybe the president was going to wake up one morning and go, why don't we go to war with Iran? I'll explain it to you over a period of time. And I understand that his method of communication is, if nothing else, rather unconventional and meandering and contingent, and he thinks he's preserving his optionality. Maybe it'll be short, maybe it'll be long, we'll see what happens, all that stuff. You can't do that with the American people. The American people are not his negotiating counterpart. They are the foundation that you need if you are going to take a military action. If you're going to go to war, you need the American people behind you. And you need them to understand why in the heck are we doing this? Do I think Iran is a malevolent actor in the region and even across the planet? Of course I do. But that's not the question at hand. The question at hand is why in the world are we trying to do another regime change? Iraq, Libya, Vietnam. I don't care what you think should happen. This is a question of what is very likely to happen based on what always happens when our best designs and our extraordinary, trained, courageous military executes well, and in the first couple of days, there's two things that everybody does. They correctly praise our United States service members. And then they say, oh, if anybody raises any objections, they go, oh, you want that bad guy still in power? Is that what you want? Of course I don't want a bad guy in power. However, the world is full of bad guys in power. And so the question at hand is not, do I wish there were better people in charge of other countries, but rather, has it met the threshold for the United States government to declare war against another country, especially in a region where we keep screwing it up? That's not a rhetorical flourish. I sound like Donald Trump a year and a half ago. He just is so fixated. I don't know if it's the ballroom or his legacy or some sort of revenge fantasy about Iran, but this man is not thinking clearly, either politically or geostrategically. Geostrategically, this is a terrible decision. And he has no plan for what happens next. His view is just like Venezuela. We're going to decapitate the person we don't like. We'll get a client state. Not so easy in Iran. Not so easy in Iran. And these things have a terrible tendency to metastasize. They really do. And after the Iraq War, my goodness, I thought there was going to be bipartisan consensus that we are not going to go into a war of choice again. Congress has a duty not just to check a reckless president, but also to represent the will of the people. And the American people, left, right, and center, do not want another regime change war in the Middle East. It's about time our president started paying attention to the American people. I yield the floor.